Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. This is Barb DeLong, your host. We have Ken Quiethawk to thank for that amazing intro. His website is nativestorytellers.com. Please check it out. He has amazing material there. Tonight we have a very exciting guest. We have a great show tonight, and Bill Mann is our guest, and we are eagerly awaiting his entrance into our chat room, or our switchboard. He's got a couple of books out on Templars material that is fascinating to me, and being a Templar Oak Island addict as I am, I can't wait for him to get in here and talk to us about his two books, both on Templars, and his Sinclair's Voyage to North America, and getting into the Oak Island mystery stuff. It's an area of history that I have long been addicted to, certainly the Oak Island material. I have been eagerly awaiting it. I've actually been doing, extra research on my own on the side here. I've been getting into Zena Halpern's work, and of course I had David Brody on a couple of weeks ago, and I had read all 8 of his books. So, when I become a fanatic, I do it wholeheartedly. I don't just do it a little bit. I do it a lot. Hi.
Hi, Bill. How are you? This is Mark and Barbara. Hey, we have our
Hi there, Mark
now.
and Barbara. For some reason, nothing's popping up here.
Well, that's okay because I have you on the telephone.
Okay.
Yeah, everything's fine now. We have our guest. Just a couple minutes of a tech glitch, but we are ready to go. And I think about 2.5 weeks ago that the Blog Talk's English Robo Babe chastised me for taking too long to explain why I was taking off until January 3rd, and we were doing the Christmas and New Year's Eve nights off, and we've ended up doing a show every week since then. So much for having a vacation. But I think that's proof that the Blog Talk English Robo Babe is becoming AI. But I think she misses me. And the Red Dragon Rider misses my little voice too. But we have our esteemed guest today, and as Barbara and I wrap up our 4 months of officially collaborating. We've gotten a little weird with the Mothman show we did. But we've been focusing a lot on history that isn't known to most of us. and just wait until we do our first culinary art show. Could be the last one we do too, but
probably.
But it's the diversity of underreported historical topics that is what the show is about, and I think tonight is going to be super captivating, and we're going to be covering secret societies and hidden messages and paintings, Oak Island, Templars in Canada, the Sinclair voyages, and lots more with Bill Mann. So I think, now that we're underway, you're going to learn an awful lot about the underreported aspects of history. So, I just want to welcome Bill Mann to Nightlight. Hi, Bill.
Hi there, Mark. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you so much for being our guest tonight. And we're going to be reviewing your trilogy, The Knights Templar in the New World, Templar Sanctuaries in North America, and the Templar Meridians. All are available on innertraditions.com. I just want to thank them for doing so much to connect us. Thanks, me and Zanita. I'll get the archive to you tomorrow. But instead of me going over your really astonishing resume, maybe you should just talk a little bit about your background, and I think everyone's going to quickly realize, Bill has a lot of hidden knowledge that most of us are have only thought about, but you've lived it. So let's talk a little bit about both sides of your family. That's just intriguing in itself.
Well, that is really interesting, Mark, and that's really what started me on this. Sorry, I'm just adjusting things here. That's really started me on this whole sort of journey that I've had over the last probably 60 years, right from the start that I can remember. It really started with my great uncle. Well, the whole Mann family. The whole Mann family is immersed entirely in Masonry, Freemasonry. But my great uncle sort of became my grandfather because my grandfather died before I was born. And unbeknownst to me, until about 20 years ago, he was Supreme Grand Master of Sovereign Great Priory Knights Templar Canada in the 50s. And so here I was as a little boy, sort of enthralled by my great uncle, reciting certain things to me, and I thought he was just eccentric, but it turns out that what he was doing was trying to pass on, I won't say secrets, but obviously a real background in Freemasonry, and he had quite a history. And the Mann family, from what I've gathered, has gone back a number of generations in Freemasonry. Now, coupled with that is my mother is full-blooded Algonquin. And a lot of this has intrigued me. And when I found out my great uncle was Supreme Grand Master Knights Templar in the 50s, I, in order to keep his legacy going, I vowed 20 years ago that one day that I would become Supreme Grand Master myself. And next August I'll be installed as Supreme Grand Master in Knights Templar Canada. And what it's known as Christian Masonry. It's the highest level of Masonry that you can achieve, and you can either go two routes. You can either go the Scottish Rite route. I'm a 32nd degree Mason, or you can go the York Rite route, which is English Masonry, and you move up through what they call chapter and cryptic Rite into Knights Templar, and so that's really provided the basis for my personal journey. Coupled with that, over the last 20 years, as you've indicated, I've written 3 books called the Templar Trilogy. all about what I believe is to be the hidden history, the history that you don't learn in school, about Knights Templar and their journeys from the 10th century onward to probably the 14th century before Columbus. And the whole premise of the books is that they're making a series of transatlantic journeys over a number of centuries, even prior to their downfall in 1307. But they were making a number of transatlantic journeys and developed a really, on a very spiritual basis, a strategic interface through marriages with the native Indians, starting with the Mi'kmaq and moving through the larger Algonquin Nation all the way out to the Rockies. And based upon that, what they did is they brought the so-called Templar treasure and over centuries moved it inland away from the church and European royalty, which were constantly pursuing them across the seas.
Okay, so in I think it's the Sanctuaries book, you state that the Mann family is a direct descendant from the Sinclairs. So
yes.
That the Sinclair voyages is big topic. Barbara just had an exciting series on with one of the authors just a month ago who wrote a book on the voyages, the settlements in New England. So, okay, so you are a direct descendant of the Henry Sinclair family.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we have that the Sinclairs have a connection to the like the Merovingian bloodline. Is that right?
Yeah, and in actual fact, I can trace my genealogy right back into Normandy and the Merovingian kings.
Okay, so
which is interesting in itself.
Oh yeah. Let's stop and talk about that. Like where what the Merovingians show up as a prominent family in like the 4th or 5th century in France, and
much more than prominent. Family, and in essence, they were in Francia. They were the reigning nobility at the time, and they continued right through the founding of France and into interbreeding with the Vikings, Rollo, in the 10th century that established Normandy, and the continuation or the disbursement of that bloodline into Scotland, England, Ireland, and areas beyond. Yes.
Okay. So, what is it about the Merovingians that seems to really has really?
Well, I think what really captures the imagination, Mark, is, and it's really being generated through a number of books, through the Da Vinci Code, and but it really started with Bagent, Lincoln, and Lee's Holy Grail, Holy Bloodline. So what it talks about is the possibility that Merovingians were direct descendants of the intermarriage between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. But what I say to all of those who interview me, don't get hung up on that. That may be just one aspect of the story. The Knights Templar themselves discovered a number of things just prior to the First Crusades. And part of that was possibly the genealogy of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, but more importantly, there was other knowledge associated with what they discovered under the Temple of Solomon.
Okay. Are you allowed to divulge a little bit of some of this information that was discovered?
Well, let's just say there were a variety of genealogical records. There was other, scientific knowledge that was recorded from the Egyptians and beyond prior to the Great Flood. There were relics, there were artifacts, virtually a whole composition of what we'll term to be ancient knowledge.
Okay. And so the Templars studied all of that for a few hundred years. That kind of takes us up and to some of the later Middle Ages. We get you brought up some of the the importance of the Castle of Gisors and Rennes-le-Château, Rosslyn Chapel.
The biggest thing that I talk about. Sorry to interrupt. The biggest thing that I talk about in my books is the continuation of ancient knowledge. A lot of people are trying to discover the finite connection between Freemasonry, the Knights Templar, and the Knights Templar, Prince Henry Sinclair, and prior to that, going right back to the original 9 Knights and what they discovered. I believe that what I've been able to do is because of my family background and because of some of the secrets that were shown to me by my great uncle. I believe that I've been able to piece together a definitive thread or connection between what was discovered about 1,000 years ago and modern day, the upper echelons or inner circle of Freemasonry around the world.
Okay, so how does that material fit in with the Sinclairs building the Rosslyn Chapel? Like with all this secret knowledge and...
Well, yeah, what's really interesting there is everybody thinks that Rosslyn Chapel is the finite resting place of the treasure. It's really not. What you always have to do is, the moral to the story, if there's nothing else that I learned, is always to look beyond. Whenever you think that you've discovered the final resting place of the Templar treasure, whenever you think you figured out the puzzle, always look beyond, because there's a higher level or a higher degree of learning. And in part, it's the ancient knowledge that's generated is the journey. That's the real treasure. It's not what lies at the end of the rainbow per se. And so Rosslyn Chapel, as a lot of people have speculated, it was a temporary depository for part of the Templar treasure. But what you have to appreciate is the Templars were warrior monks, but they were the foremost strategists of their time. And it just makes sense from what I've discovered that they wouldn't have put all their eggs in one basket. They would disperse the secrets around the world after that fateful night of Friday, October the 13th, 1307.
Okay, so that's a good leaping off point. With the what you just said about dispersing the treasures. So how do we go from like the early stages of modern France and Scotland, and we get to Canada?
Sure.
Where does that? How do we make that leap across the Atlantic Ocean?
Well, you have to understand that the original Knights Templar, they were obviously French, and outwardly, they were some of the greatest French Catholic families to be established in early France. But inwardly, they still maintained the Jewish mysticism. So, knowing that, all of the original 9 knight families were derived from the Jewish high priest, which virtually hid the treasure during its sacking of the Temple of Solomon. And it was through continuation of that priesthood, that family line, that the original 9 knights knew exactly where to dig. And that continuation of that knowledge extended and interspersed into the Norman families, first through the Vikings and then the Sinclairs. The Sinclairs were obviously of Norman background, and so when the treasure was dispersed after 1307, it went to a number of places that were family homes per se of the original 9 knights, Scotland being one, Denmark being another, Portugal being another, and North America being probably the most secretive. Remember that the whole premise is that North America was visited not only by the Knights Templar over a series of centuries, but they were following the footsteps of other secret societies established through the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians, the Greeks, the Romans. You always have to look beyond in terms of once you think you have that definitive connection, think of how that connection has spread its tentacles throughout Europe and the Mediterranean and into North America, all on a very secretive basis. Because if you had secret knowledge which allowed you to complete transatlantic voyages back and forth to North America over a number of centuries, obviously you would disguise that knowledge under various layers of esoteric knowledge and other secrets.
Right, and okay, yeah, we'll be getting into some of these esoteric secrets throughout the show, but
sure.
You know, one of the pieces of evidence that you mentioned in the Knights Templar and the New World is the Zeno map.
Yes.
And you know, we could start there. When David Brody was a guest with Barbara about a month ago, he was talking about the Westford Knight. You know, that's included in your book too. So
yeah,
there's we spend some time talking about the evidence that backs up that Europeans were here long before Columbus. So maybe start with the map.
Sure. Well, the map's really interesting. You have to appreciate that Prince Henry Sinclair was hereditary Grand Master and Knights Templar of Scotland. But they really needed seafaring admirals, and the 2 Zeno brothers out of Venice, who were also Knights Templar, were virtually provided to them. There's a story that they washed up on shore in Scotland and they came together, but that's not by chance. That's all of this is arranged. So the Knights Templar, who at that time were the greatest seafarers in the world, they possessed not only the knowledge developed over centuries by Venetians, by the Greeks, by the Romans, but also by the Normans and specifically the Vikings. And in essence, Prince Henry Sinclair, following the Zeno map created by the Zeno brothers, were following in the footsteps of the Norse Vikings. And they were hopscotching from Iceland to Greenland to Baffin Island down along the eastern seaboard into Nova Scotia. And they knew the signs, symbols, and tokens of their forefathers, which allowed them to make that contact with the Native Americans. Trust me, the Knights Templar or the Norse Vikings wouldn't have gotten a stranglehold on the eastern seaboard if the Native Americans didn't want them to, didn't allow them.
Okay.
So all of those clues that are now coming out, the Westford Night, the Newport Tower, all of these things coming together, carved stones. There's it's not only evidence that's coming to light through Prince Henry Sinclair's voyage, but also through my involvement with the Grand Medicine Society of Medewin of North America, the Native American side. And there's not only myths, legends, but also oral tradition, oral history through the ceremonies. And there's also artifacts that are in possession of the Native Americans that really attest to the strategic intermarriages by the Knights Templar and the Native North Americans.
Okay, and one of it's not really an artifact, but one of the similarities between the Sinclairs and the Micmac is the similarity in flags.
Yes, there's a lot of evidence, even beyond the similarity in the Knights Templar banner and the Mi'kmaq banner. It's essentially the mirror image, and I can tell you that having gone through a variety of ritual and ceremonies, that in fact the Medewin ritual is a mirror image of the Knights Templar ritual that we practice today. You just have to have the eyes in order to see the corresponding symbols and signs and tokens.
Okay, so the similarity in ceremonial activities, shows that there's obvious exchange of ideas at some point, and you also mentioned the importance of folklore, and you have this character Goose Cup and the Knights Templar. So let's stick with some of this folklore for a little while longer. Then we need to get into the other evidence of the foundations of the villages and castles on the Zeno map.
You got to be very careful. A lot of people, because there's evidence in the Native American legends, assume Prince Henry Sinclair to be Glooscap. It's the other way around. Prince Henry Sinclair may have assumed some of the attributes of Glooscap, but Glooscap is a deity, a man god of the Mi'kmaq, and it shouldn't be mistaken that Glooscap was Prince Henry Sinclair. But having said that, it's really interesting that there's a variety of similarities. You have to remember that, again, the Knights Templar were warrior monks, and they believed in the forces of nature. They outwardly were Christians, but inwardly believed in a very higher spiritual level. They believed that they could speak directly to God without the assistance of the church. So they shared a lot in common with the spiritual leaders of the North Americans. And so they had a commonality that they shared from a spirituality point of view on a higher level. And I like to explain the higher level. There's a series of what they call little keys of Solomon, and it's the basic knowledge which would have been transferred from the ancients. It would have included astronomy, dualism, numerology, androgyny, etymology, basic principles of the forces of nature. And the Knights Templar specifically, and Native Americans believe it also, is that there's order in nature, and as such you can not necessarily control nature, but you can be one with nature. And so the North American Indigenous people would have recognized the spirituality with the Knights Templar very common to their own. And it's for that reason, and that reason alone, that they were able to come together. And through that, what better way to bond and to solidify the engagement, but through intermarriage. A number of the Mi'kmaq princesses were married off to very high-ranking knights, or the bloodline members themselves that were accompanying the Knights Templar.
Okay, so you're just basically a descendant from that same idea, just the Templars marrying the native, having the native wives, and seal all these families, and what else was going on? And it's you have some of the bloodline is still preserved that way as well.
Sure, and everybody asks me, well, are you the holy bloodline? And I'll say that's secondary to the whole story. The whole story, everybody wants to concentrate on that, right? Because of the Da Vinci Code. And right. I say to him, I said, look, always look beyond. Look beyond. Why were there these strategic intermarriages with the Native North Americans? It's because the Native North Americans were able to guide them inland, knowing full well that the church and the state was in hot pursuit of these Knights Templar over centuries. The Jesuits that showed up following Champlain, they moved immediately past Montreal into inland, into North America, because they knew the stories, they knew the thinking of the Knights Templar, that they wouldn't just position themselves in Nova Scotia and stay there. They wouldn't position them in Rhode Island and stay there. They were too exposed there. So this whole story of pursuit of the Knights Templar and the bloodline has occurred over 1,000 years, and it's continuing to this day.
Wow, that's even though you have the part, the bloodline, like do like walk across a swimming pool or anything like that?
No, I don't think so.
No, okay, all right.
No, that you shouldn't look at it that way.
Okay, I was just wondering if.
Yeah, that was just. I can see what you're saying, Mark. But again, that's secondary. Don't get hung up on that. Think about.
It's interesting.
Okay, maybe that it is very interesting, but it's only one part of the story. Think about the larger story. What did the Knights possess that allowed them? Like, they answered originally only to the Pope. What did they possess that scared the Vatican to the point that they looked to obliterate the Knights Templar? Was it only this knowledge of the Holy Bloodline, or was there something else? Something else in terms of ancient knowledge, which identified this continuing of an ability to converse with God directly, to travel, circumnavigate the world when the church was dictating that the earth was flat. what ancient knowledge did they possess that allowed them to essentially blackmail the church for about 300 years, but also allowed them to essentially be one step ahead of everybody for probably the last 1,000 years.
No, they had all kinds of hidden knowledge.
Exactly.
The bloodline. Marriage and child. If you want to go in that direction as
sure,
well.
Sure.
There was a bit of a threat to the church teachings.
Absolutely, but think about it. When the Da Vinci Code come out, it made such a splash, but now it's sort of being dismissed as being a work of fiction and by the church, and let's move on type of thing. The church is obviously losing grasp or control of their power over the past 2,000 years. It's because people are finally asking questions in terms of open knowledge. What other knowledge is there out there that really demonstrates that there were ancient civilizations prior to the flood, to the Great Flood? And what did they possess? And was there a continuation of that knowledge to right to the point that we talked today?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Barbara. How are you?
I'm terrific. Enthralled, actually. So, if the Templars had secrets, it appears that their secrets would have shaken the very foundation of Christianity.
Yes.
So
yes, and maybe part of those secrets was what's the basis of Christianity? The basis of Christianity is that Christ rose on the third day and took a seat beside God in the heavens. What if to me, Christ is divine. The Christian mysteries, Christ practiced the Christian mysteries. He was a prophet. Is he no less divine? Is he no less divine if he's just proven to be a man?
Well, the Bible said that he sent his son down here to be human, so obviously he was human.
Yes, and we were.
And so, in many ways, we are all sons and daughters of God. So,
yes, very, very much so. Very much so. But over the past 2,000 years, the church has had control of the message to the point that the only way that you could, in actual fact, converse with God, be one with God, was through the church.
Yeah. So you wipe out the church.
Yes.
And it seems to me that the people today, even though these mysteries haven't been discovered, are questioning all of this anyhow.
Yes, very much so.
So the treasure of the Templars was enlightenment.
Absolutely. You got it right there. And that people, anybody who I talk to through my website or whatever, if they come on and say, I know where the treasure is buried, such as Oak Island, I say, well, that's nice, but I really don't want to converse with you. But if you want to talk about the journey of enlightenment, I'll talk to you for a couple hours.
There's an old story, an old ancient story about when man was created. The gods, notice it's gods, decided that all of a sudden they made a mistake because their creation had all of their powers, and somehow they had to hide those powers from him, so that he didn't take his place among them and not be ready. And they argued for generations trying to figure out where to hide the knowledge, not on the moon, not in the seas, because man would eventually find them. An old crone wandered in finally and said, enough. I'll tell you where to hide it so they'll never find it. And she said, hide it within them. They'll never look there.
Yes, within their soul. Now, what's really interesting is in all of my research and in my movement in Freemasonry, I really discovered that the soul doesn't lie in your heart. Your soul is through logic and reason, through your brain, through your mind. It's man has been given a terrific gift, and many of us don't use it. But if you start to use reason and logic on a higher level, and this is what Freemasonry is all about. It through their ritual, even North American Medewan ritual is the same. What it does is open up that soul, open up your mind to that enlightenment.
Yeah, and so it's awareness and sensitivity.
Absolutely.
And I've often said that Freemasonry was a man's way of finding the spiritual pathway.
It is, and it's unfortunate that it is sort of a man's way. And what I like to think is that there's a real balance, because in the Indigenous people in North America, they practice a matriarchal society. So you got your patriarchal society balanced by your matriarchal society. And that's one of the little keys of Solomon, androgyny, is the coming together of male and female. I always like to say that my wife is the conduit. She's the one that keeps me grounded, that allows me to reason what I've written about in my books. And without her, I wouldn't be able to.
Well, it seems to me then that the Templar treasure is buried within each of us.
It is. But there's also a physical treasure out there, but it may not be what people are always looking for. I always laugh watching The Curse of Oak Island on the History Channel. You know, every 10 minutes, could this be the most significant find of all time? And they're looking for gold and silver. Well, if they're looking for gold and silver, they missed the true treasure. They missed the reasoning.
Well, Bill, go ahead, Barbara.
No, go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to butt in, but.
No. I was just gonna say, do you think something was, buried there temporarily before it was moved?
Absolutely, but everybody's attributing. It's funny. The guys on The Curse of Oak Island always come back to the Knights Templar because it's popular and it's sexy, because of the Da Vinci Code and other books that are written about it. But what they don't think about is that the Knights Templar could have assumed earlier works and built upon those by other secret societies that came before them. So I would look at Oak Island very, very much like Rosslyn Chapel. It was a temporary depository. It was like a banking system. You moved certain artifacts, you moved certain relics from one site to another. Now the whole thing, what really gets me is that nobody's bothered to ask the question about Oak Island. Why would you construct the works of Oak Island and deposit something there if you didn't know how to recover it and move it and take it somewhere else? You can always make a withdrawal from a bank.
Yeah, I think they did withdraw it for sure, but it's held our attention for 6 years, so you got to give them credit for that.
Oh no, absolutely, and I wish them all the best. But if they're looking for gold and silver, they may find it, because what they're discovering is that high-ranking British Masons were there's a lot of evidence of high-ranking British Masons on the island from 1750 to 1800 throughout the American Revolution.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they'll find something, but
if they spend enough money. Now what they have to realize is that no matter what sites I've discovered, I've always discovered them through two basic elements or two basic principles of Freemasonry. One is sacred geometry, and which is just the geometry that we learn now in high school. But 2,000 years ago, it would be considered to be, sacred in terms of its application from the Greeks, from the Greek philosophers, through the Romans, through other secret societies as that was passed down. Sacred geometry and moral allegory. Barbara, you touched upon it right there. There's mythology, there's allegory, there's myth, there's legend, which is based upon a moral or a lesson. And the lesson about Oak Island is always to look beyond. Whenever you think that you've found the central, the last depository of that treasure, always look beyond.
Well, it's like the different levels of Masonry. There's always somewhere else to go. There's always someone else to go until, of course, you get to 33, and that has to be bestowed upon you. But it seems to me that the whole legend or mystery or whatever of following the Templars' treasure should lead someone to a spiritual understanding within themselves until they don't need to search for it anymore because they don't need to find something they have within themselves.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, again, the moral to the story. That's really what I've discovered over this lifelong journey. Some of the finest gentlemen that I've met throughout my travels are high-ranking Masons, and I don't say that because I come from a long line of Masons. That's a judgment outside of Freemasonry itself. Really, it's good men that really exude that spirituality, that self-awareness that I wish everybody in the world could do that. Be a lot better place.
I want to be specific here in that spirituality is not a philosophy, it's a way of life.
Absolutely. And, you can practice spirituality on a number of levels and in a number of different ways. And as I say, through my family background, I practice it on its mirror images, and it really is enlightening to me. And every day I'm enlightened even more. Its application, and not only on a variety of levels, but if you practice at work, if you practice it with your neighbor, it's rewarding in itself.
Absolutely, but there's nothing like a good treasure hunt. Oh,
there is. Absolutely. Now, if you want to talk about a treasure hunt on that level, I can talk about that too. Yes.
Yeah.
But I think we should understand. You have to understand the mindset of the Knights Templar, right from the original Knights Templar onwards, right through Freemasonry to the modern day. That the spirituality, the achievement of being able to essentially be one with God through ritual, through ceremony, through tradition, is the absolute treasure. Now, if you want to apply it on a physical level, yes, I can explain how I believe that I've unfolded the treasure map through a series of clues also, because the treasure search is on a variety of levels.
Yeah, and I truly believe that they did find documents of some sort.
Yes.
There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, even the Rosslyn Chapel material, that priest was blackmailing the church. So
absolutely.
So
the Rennes-le Chateau material has been readily dismissed. But what I tell people is I'm the world's biggest skeptic too, and whatever you discover, carve away all the outer layers, and about 10% what you've discovered will be the truth.
Yeah.
And apply that truth.
Well, Bill, seeing as the treasure maps and hidden information, you do present a convincing case with the Shepherds of Arcadia painting. That seems to be a clue that fits in pretty frequently with these Templar studies, and
it does.
How does all of that fit in with what we're discussing?
Well, what I'm fascinated by is that you have probably two of the greatest artists in the High Renaissance. You have Nicholas Poussin and David 10 years the younger. And David 10 years younger, he actually was probably on a comparable scale to Nicholas Poussin, but it's because the information that was generated through Poussin's paintings. It's like a 500-piece jigsaw puzzle. What I find amazing is that painters, sculptors, other artists over the centuries have been able to carve clues that are in plain sight to those that understand them readily into their paintings or into their carvings. And of course, we know a lot about Saunier and Rennes-le Chateau and the two paintings that are referred to as clues of the Priory of Zion, and Da Vinci being one of the acclaimed masters of the Priory of Zion. Now, that the Priory of Zion itself has been dismissed by the church. It wasn't the inner circle of the Knights Templar, but I can tell you it was. It just carried on through a different name. And what I've been able to do is I've been able to piece together those two puzzles and apply them to an ancient meridian pattern that I established across North America. And the clues themselves in the paintings, and we're talking about various degrees or layers of the painting, the underpainting, and the elements within the painting being the figures themselves, they all come together and provide a variety of clues that point to where I believe the physical treasure still lies to this day, as it was moved across North America. So if you want to talk about it on that physical layer of, Barbara mentioned that she believes that they're treasure, and I believe it also. I think that I pinpointed exactly in the book, and you'll say, why did you do that? I've always found the journey itself to be the enlightenment, not what you discovered at the end of the rainbow. And what I'm suggesting is that I believe I know where the treasure lies, but it should remain where it is, because obviously it will cause on one level certain catastrophic events that could be deadly to a number of societies.
Okay. Well, we don't want to we don't want Nightlight to be known for probably those catastrophes. So we'll just leave the treasure hidden. But it would be nice to get maybe just one gold bar out of there. But for the moment, okay, we'll just leave it where the treasure lies. But you bring to our attention Poussin's use of the underlying
layers of pattern.
That's important in understanding the painting as well. Can you talk about the use of colors?
Well, it all obviously breaks down. Now, Poussin also was a Rosicrucian, and if you know the difference between Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism, they're all elements of Christian Masonry. But where Freemasonry talks about and uses the allegory of the rebuilding of Solomon's castle, and talking about the Masons themselves, Rosicrucianism talks about the transmutation of certain elements to the Philosopher's Stone through alchemy. and the use of color and numerology on a variety of levels. Now, what I am fascinated by Poussin's painting, The Shepherds of Arcadia, is there's 4 basic elements or 4 figures in the painting. Actually, there's a hidden 5th element because the shepherdess is pregnant, and it's the colors of the clothing that the figures wear. All of those are clues on a variety of levels, and they move through a sequence, a numerological sequence, and I refer back to these little keys of Solomon. And what they lead you to is they provide the cornerstone to David Tenyer's painting of St. Anthony and St. Paul, which is brilliant. And you have 20 years between the 2 paintings. You have 2 artists, but the second artist built upon what the first artist was really conveying. And the first artist was using information that was provided by some of the early explorers, the mapping of the northeastern seaboard and the movement through the Great Lakes. And that's Poussin's Shepherd of Arcadia. And we know that Nova Scotia and the area around it was called Acadia or Arcadia. So that was that on one level, but that provides the cornerstone, in Masonic terms, the cornerstone to a greater painting of St. Anthony and St. Paul. And if you know your history of St. Anthony and St. Paul, they were the two first mystic monks that took to the wilderness to debate this question of how to converse with God. So adding all of those elements, you move through the various paintings and layered sequence, and it shows you it built upon the information that was provided by people such as Champlain and the Jesuits and Nicolet, all the information that was coming back through France to the secret societies, and it's built upon that, and it ultimately gives you the location of where I believe the Templar treasure lies to this day. It's very hard to describe with over the radio, but that's essentially the way it's identified.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure people can just Google. The listeners can Google it, and it'll come up. And there's four people kind of looking at. It seems like an above ground tomb.
From a biblical point of view, it's the 4 witnesses of the transfiguration of Christ, and the tomb itself is a representative of Christ's tomb in a very high Renaissance way. Yeah, and I'm sure if the listeners will just take a minute to look at it, they'll sure.
That's in the book. It's a pretty famous painting, and you see it on like the History Channel and Travel Channel.
Yeah.
When they do shows on the Templars as well. So it is really well done painting, and your descriptions and how all the circles, like all these spheres work within the painting as well. It's very intriguing. But one of the other since we're kind of talking about art, and I had a question. It really isn't about the little keys of Solomon and the what you said about the androgyny, but when David Brody was a guest in his, I think, second to last book, he had a scene set at Notre Dame de Montreal. I think it's like the main church.
Actually, it's Notre Dame de Bon Secours. of the good sisters. Yes.
Okay. And he drew attention to the artwork in that church.
Yes.
And there's he continued amplifying the legacy of some of the Mary statues, and what there's I think it's the use of the colors on the statue.
It's the use of the colors on the statue. Obviously, red and white is representative of Templars. Green is representative, we talk about ancient knowledge, and that's of Neolithic man and the green man. The goddess is usually ensconced in gold and blue, and that's representative of the Hellenic period of the goddess. So all of these colors obviously relate to certain periods. And so Barbara talked about the concept of God, and obviously we know Christianity through the Council of Nicaea, through Constantine, that certain concepts were accepted for Christianity, and certain concepts were neglected or thrown to the side. What you find, if you look at mythology, obviously there's the development of a force of nature, the creator, as Native North Americans relate to it, and then you move into the Hellenic, the goddess, per se, or as Barbara says, the gods. And then we have the Jewish concept of one God, the omnipotent God, and then Jesus Christ being the Son of God. It talks about the evolution, and there's, as you've noted, there are clues that artists have used that this secret has been within the inner circle, and many of those who carried the secret have been artists themselves, and they've been able to use their art ostensibly to portray little inklings of the underlying secrets or development or evolution of God in their paintings, in their sculptures, and they speak to this underlying secret through a variety of levels, through a variety of clues, including color, including numbers, including figurative placements, the completion of the square, the hidden fifth element, all of those things.
Yeah, and David touched on those topics in the chapter that was set in the church. When the scene was set there, so it's just really interesting how that legacy keeps reappearing in the artwork up until a somewhat recent time.
Well, even I can tell you, it's even continuing some artworks right to today. Actually, David Brody is. I know David, and he does a great job in terms of taking little elements such as that and fictionalizing them into stories. Once again, that is continuing a tradition throughout the centuries. There have been great books. Arthur Conan Doyle embedded certain elements of the same secret of Freemasonry itself within his many stories of Sherlock Holmes.
Well, not to get too esoteric here, but I'm gonna.
We can go off on a tangent, Barbara, if you want.
Oh, I'm fully capable of that.
Yeah, I am too.
It would seem to me that at certain periods of time, when the levels of consciousness of humanity have reached a certain point, symbols of certain kinds, of different kinds, are imparted to different people in different ways all across the globe. And it feels to me as though it's almost as though it's a seeding of thought that will trigger imagination, that will open awareness and allow spirituality to flow more freely.
Actually, that's very well put. And no, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, and I think we're at one of those points.
I believe we are at one of those points, and I believe there are events happening in the world, not very nice events, that are even triggering that, or even subjecting our subconscious in an odd way to a challenge to reach beyond and to grasp in a spiritual way and to be able to reason. And in many ways, people over the centuries have only been able to reason things through myths and legends, to reason that higher level of consciousness, that enlightenment, and to understand that there's a balance that we've necessarily lost, or there's a balance of good and evil in the world that at times it's swaying back and forth here now, but that hopefully good will triumph over evil, and that people will come to a collective consciousness.
Well, yeah, and in order to achieve a greater foundation, you have to destroy the one that you're already on. So
absolutely.
My feeling is that through inspiration and intuition, which is becoming more a part of everybody's reality than it used to be.
Yes.
Those hints or there's pieces of inspiration are now being applied to reality as opposed to just being held within. And that's where you get a lot of the color coming in. That's where you get a lot of the I did a deck of cards that were hand-painted mandalas, and found that at the same time in the Pacific Northwest there was an ashram that had similar patterns that were created that people used for meditation. And I did find out that also they were patterns that were now being expressed in crop circles, and patterns that Native Americans called their power signs, power shields. So that again, a level of inspiration brings forth sacred geometry in different forms in different places that helps to trigger awareness in other people. Absolutely,
and that you know what, that's a great observation. So the question is, are we subconsciously, is there within our blood DNA or whatever, is there an ancient memory of a common origin that people are now starting to draw up through a certain level of enlightenment and a realization that we all share certain common elements that really are empowering us to bring together that collective consciousness once more that is being suppressed for the longest time.
I agree. I think it's beginning to activate people who wouldn't have been activated in many ways before. So
exactly.
It's kind of fun. It's fun to watch.
It's fun to watch, and it's also fun to see that opening of acceptance. As I say, for the last 2,000 years, and I don't want to bash the church per se, but they've been able to control that message, and I find it very interesting. And in many ways, many pathways, many spiritual pathways, people are now starting to develop that collective consciousness. And it's not the case that it's far out there. I think it provides us with substance to the point that people are starting to realize that if we come together, everybody's an individual, but we do share a commonality, and hopefully that'll be expressed through certain actions around the world, actions that we're seeing in many ways, at Christmas, other times of ceremony and things like that, that spirituality, that common goodness, I think is what you really want to describe it as.
Oh, yeah, and, a lot of people say, well, okay, the Bible was inspired work, and, when the Bible was done, no more inspiration was coming through. And I think today we are seeing more inspirational work than ever before, and it's sort of like the God within is talking to us externally, which is a really wonderful thing.
It is, and it's really interesting, as you say, there's elements that can trigger that within people, whether it's color, whether it's numbers, whether it's relationships. Many people experience it by going for a walk in the woods. Many people experience it through family connections or reconnections. There's many triggers, but I believe it's a welling up of a spirit, and I'm actually encouraged by that. Whereas many people are really discouraged by some of the events that's happening around the world right now. I see as you say, the floodgates opening, and because of my family background, I've been exposed to a number of things that I think probably have allowed me to access that level of spirituality a little bit better or a little quicker than most people have.
That's exciting.
It is, very much so. Very much so. And so is it the journey that we're talking about, or is it the final resting place of the treasure? That's the moral to it all. Always look beyond. Even if you find the treasure, always look beyond.
Well, even if you find the treasure, there's another journey beginning.
Exactly.
I mean,
Now the real question is,
it would be a shame if there was just the one journey. There has to be more than that.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Well, it's like a chess game. There's many ways to win a chess game. There's many pathways across North America. It's whatever pathway people choose. And the Knights Templar, obviously, they were warrior monks. They chose a certain pathway, a certain spirituality, but they were introduced to other levels of spirituality, as I say, through their interactions, through their strategic intermarriages with the Native American Indigenous population. This is what I find exciting, not only because of my mother's family line, but because of some of the things that I've been taught. The wisdom of the North American Indians is just tremendous. It's just tremendous.
Well, you bring up a point that has bothered me greatly. In my opinion, the Pilgrims invaded this land and declared the Indians primitive and tried to bring them to Christianity without taking the time to learn the wisdom of their religion.
Yes.
And
but
how wise of the Templars? How wise of the Templars, though, to take the time and to blend the two cultures instead of negating one.
Yes, and think of, knowledge is power. Think they generated or regenerated their power through that knowledge, and through that access to other spirituality. And as I say, I've been exposed because of my position. There's physical evidence of these over centuries, these strategic intermarriages through the natives and the Knights Templar. Now, this is really interesting. Why is there persecution of Native North Americans? Why, through the residential schools, did the Catholic Church try to obliterate the indigenous cultures? Because there was an inkling of what they possessed, not only on a spiritual level, but on a physical level.
Just a lot of envy.
Well, it goes beyond envy. I think much like the Knights Templar, the Church believed that the Knights Templar possessed something physically that could destroy the Church. And as we know through history over the last 2,000 years, the secret police of the Church, the Jesuits, did everything to obliterate the Native North Americans. And there's a lot of historical fact to that. But it's interesting. The spirit of the Native North Americans hasn't been crushed, and I can tell you they'll rise up again. And they'll take their rightful place alongside the leaders of North America, Turtle Island.
Yeah, well, Bill, you already mentioned, in the first hour, there were a lot of, once the Templars and the Native people started marrying, and cementing the bonds between the two cultures. Well, even before that, there was a commonality. You just go back 2,000 years, just say to like the Hopewell people, and which would be say roughly kind of like early stages of Christianity. There were still parallels and ceremonial rituals, and just having a concept of sinful behavior, penance. That wasn't just exclusively Christian. This was just something common throughout North America at the same time that the apostles are just starting to wander through the deserts, preaching. You need to repent. Well, it was already being done here in North America.
Well, so, as I pointed out, many people consider early indigenous civilizations across North America in pre-Christian times to be savages. They were farthest thing from savages. Native North American Indians, they lived in cities. They practiced technology that was, in many cases, far surpassed the Eastern technology of across Europe and Asia. So, I always get a kick out of people that consider indigenous people to be savages. They're nothing much. Their rules of law were actually adopted by the founding fathers. The Iroquois Confederacy had rules of law that were actually embedded within the American Constitution. The founding fathers of America, they were practicing duelists. A lot of people think that they were Christians, Christians that came over on the Mayflower. They were the farthest thing from that. They realized, because they were also descendants of the Knights Templar, they realized that there were forces in nature. There was a different way to enlightenment that we're talking about today, and they wanted to create a new Jerusalem. A mirror image of Jerusalem in the New World, per se.
Okay, and some of this section of our discussion is kind of similar to what Scott Walter consulted with you about for his Akhenaten and the Founding Fathers book. And Scott and Janet are friends of the show, and
they're very good. And actually, they're very good friends of mine. I've known them for about 20 years. The key there is no one person has all the answers. and David Brody, Scott, Janet Walter, Alan Butler, we sort of formed this little group that we all bounce ideas off of each other, and it's been a great collaboration in terms of some of the ideas that we talked about.
Yeah, and yes, Scott, really does focus on, how much your contributions, led him to have greater understanding of what he's looking at in his what journeys.
Sure.
For the Kensington runestone, all that stuff. But one of the I thought it was an interesting. Where is it? The Duluth stone.
The Kensington runestone.
There's the Duluth stone.
There's the Duluth stone.
That's chapter 7 of his book, and he did I think he had one of his TV show episodes based on that, and there was all the land markers. Can you tell us a little bit about how all those carved stones fit into the Templars being in Canada, North America?
Well, remember that as the original Knights Templar, as they moved across North America, they would have wanted to leave signs, seals, or tokens that were recognizable to their fellow initiates, that maybe 200 years later that somebody would be following a similar path. What better way than to carve those signs into stone markers, knowing that stone markers would have remained. And what better way to also create those signs within certain landmarks that were quite evident and that wouldn't change over the centuries across North America. So there were always signs and seals, and this is what the people on Oak Island have discovered over the years. They've discovered a little bit of the signs, seals, and tokens, but they're not the truly initiated. So they don't understand how to apply those signs on a variety of levels. But what Scott has been done, and he's concentrated on, and it's actually been brilliant in many ways because of his background, he's been able to interpret those stones the way they should be, and to authenticate those stones from a timing and an age point of view. And they were essentially markers on a trail that would lead you along a variety of pathways across North America to essentially that one final point of discovery. And Scott's dealt with it on a different level than I have, but I've been able to guide him in some ways. And Scott, some of the work that he's done has really helped me. And Janet and Alan Butler have done it on a different level. So again, there's a moral to the story: is that not one person knows the entire story, and that you need help to piece the story together. But the markers, Scott is looking at a physical movement. On one level, I am also, of the physical movement of the Knights Templar inland through their guides, through their blood brothers, and leaving markers or trails along the way for those who come after them, whether it be 100 years, 200 years, or 500 years.
Okay.
And only those stones are only being rediscovered now as we talk about it. A lot of people are actually looking for them, and once you learn the signs and what to look for, things start to come more to you, more readily to you.
Yeah. So, Scott says or interprets them as what their land claims, and that kind of goes back to a little bit of what you mentioned a few minutes ago was North America being the New Jerusalem. Do you think that's a possibility that North America can just be a better place?
No, absolutely, and I think that's what the Knights Templar saw in North America.
Hi guys. There's somebody here with a question. If I could bring Mike on, would that be okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Mike.
Hold on.
Am I on?
Hi, Mike.
Am I on, Mr. Mann?
You're on.
Yes, Mike. How are you?
Is it fine? Thanks. Is it right worshipful or brother? What is it? What am I?
Actually, if you want to, right eminent knight.
Right eminent knight. So you're not active in Blue Lodge then. You're mostly Templar.
I am. But let's say tonight I'm right eminent knight.
Okay. Now the only question that I have, I was looking at the differences. I tried looking up Oakville, and I saw that there are different Grand Lodges up in Canada. I didn't know that. I'm out of New York.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that charters were turned in for political reasons. That's it. And then I guess charters came back. They pulled out of Quebec, and then it sounds like a mess. I don't know. Maybe I didn't read far enough, but I mean,
I don't think you read far enough.
Okay, so there is one Grand Lodge for Canada then.
Yes, there is.
Okay, good.
There's a Grand Lodge of Ontario.
Okay, so two different. All right, but none of them are clandestine or anything.
Not at all. Not at all. We're talking about Masonic orders.
Right. Okay. Great. I just wanted to make sure before I started discussing with you because you know the deal on that.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. And now, a lot of, I think the biggest problem that you have, I'm sure you know Arturo, Art.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy. Written some phenomenal books, and he's got quite the archive with Pike. I mean, he has a lot handy to him. But I think the problem with a lot of these...
Actually, sorry to interrupt there, but if you ask me what my next book is going to be about, I'll tell you. But go on, and we'll talk about what you want to talk about first.
What I think, my main focus, we're into history basically, but my main focus is not on the Masonic end, it's World War II. But I find the problem with a lot of these people that come in and that are critical, whether it's Freemasonry, anything regarding history, they judge it, they read it, they look at it through today's eyes, today's values, today's verbiage. They interpret things so that they can understand it, and that's the wrong way to do it. If you don't understand the intent, the language, how things were back then, how the people lived and their thoughts back then, you're never going to really understand what was going on in history. And I think it's the same with the history.
I would agree. I would agree, absolutely. Give you an example. My great uncle and his four brothers were made Masons in the trenches of the First World War.
Yep.
I don't think any of us can imagine the turmoil and the emotion involved in that brotherhood that was established in the trenches.
No, it means a lot. It's very, very strong. Every now and then I visit the lodge out in Provincetown, and phenomenal, some of the history. And the secretary told me they were going through the records, some of the notes, the minutes, and they found there was a ship captain, because a lot of them were whalers back then. He wanted his son to take his third degree because they were sailing. Before he went off to sea, he wanted to raise his son to make sure that he got it. So they did it. They held a special communication. They held the degree. And right then, after they finished, and they had a collation afterwards and everything else, they went off, they sailed off, and they were never seen again. The ship sank.
Well, I can tell you, interesting enough, you can imagine my surprise. You can imagine my surprise when 20 years ago when my mother died, and it was only through going through old photographs and stuff that I discovered my great uncle in his Knights Templar uniform. And I thought,
that's great.
This is interesting. So it was through the Grand Lodge that I was passed on from gentleman, and finally I was able to discover and everything was so secretive, and that's something that I can't understand. My generation, I feel that if anybody asks me and is serious about it, I'll explain to them anything that I know. Well, other than maybe the signs of recognition. And I'm open to talk about anything, and that's what I'm putting in my books. Now, you may find it interesting. My next book, I was Grand Historian and Grand Archivist for the Knights Templar of Canada about 4 or 5 years ago, Sovereign Great Priory. And actually, if you want to look up the website, you can look it up, www.knightstemplar.ca. And it's associated with the Grand Encampment.
Okay. Now, one thing. Now that I'm relaxed talking to you, I mean, thanks for that. I've got a question for you. I had a couple of people ask me to join. They said it was St. John's Priory, something, the Knights Templar, and it turns out that it's not affiliated with us.
No.
And I said, what is this? And they said, well, your initiation will take $600 for you to buy the uniform and a sword, and I said, wait a minute, what is this group, and who are these people? And I don't know, but they're out there. They've got websites and everything, and a lot of the people that are joining them, I'm seeing, are military, retired military, and I think it's like a military-style fraternity that they're creating that has nothing to do with Masonry.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. And over in Europe, there's a number of Knights Templar offshoots that have nothing to do with Masonry either. If you really want to check out the Grand Encampment, look up www.knightstemplar.org, and that's Christian Masonry right there, the Grand Encampment.
All right. If you go to your Facebook page, I just liked your page. I don't know if it'll show you, so that way you can see how I am, because I know sometimes on Blog Talk Radio, you never know, but you'll see I'm for real. I'm the master of my lodge.
Yeah. Well, and, what's really interesting there. I can tell just from your opening comments there that you are a Mason. But you know what, Mason or non-Mason alike, I like to present this material because it provides, as Barbara says, food for thought.
And it gets rid of a lot of the smoke. It gets rid of a lot of the confusion and everything that's out.
Exactly.
And there's too much garbage that's out. I mean, I play with people, and when a guy my guys tell me they would finish a first degree, I usually line the guys up, and when they first take a break, and I congratulate them, and I say, now, that we don't take you down to Washington until you get your third degree. Then we take you in that room underneath, and you're allowed to take out one piece of gold. But you have to wait till you take your third degree before we take. And the guys are coming up to me going, Mike, would you stop it? And they're looking at me with their mouths open because they believe this Hollywood stuff because they don't know anything else. So it's great that the information's out there to clear it up. Some of the myths and aliens and conspiracy stuff, it's unbelievable.
Actually, I'm glad that you're online because you may find my next book kind of interesting. As Grand Historian, Grand Archivist, I discovered a series of letters from Albert Pike, the Sovereign Grand Commander of Southern Jurisdiction, to essentially his counterpart in Canada, a Colonel William James Burry MacLeod Moore, who was Supreme Grand Master and Sovereign Grand Commander here in Canada. And the letters themselves were fascinating. I'm fascinated by Albert Pike because on one level, here's a Confederate general that supposedly was involved in Knights of the Golden Circle and the Ku Klux Klan. But as we know,
that wasn't true.
No, as we know that he was more known Prince Hall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to me, the most fascinating thing was these letters, which I essentially developed a fictional story around, and my book will be coming out next fall after my installation as Supreme Grand Master here in Canada, and it's called the Pike Letters.
Okay, you're already booked.
Sorry?
We want to book you for that show. Just, Yeah, we'll stay in touch about that one. This is just
sure.
Mike can call in with his review as well. We want you back.
Sure. No, it's great that a show that's out there, BTR, can get somebody that's credible, that knows what they're talking about, and that has. I mean, this is perfect. So you're not dealing with the Alex Jones of the Masonic world of the Knights Templar. Yeah. No, this is nice. It's refreshing for once. No, that's really good, great deal. But no, I find it a lot interesting. And now the thing about Oak Island, I don't know. I think that's another. I don't know if that's a myth. I don't know what to think of that. I haven't read up enough about it, but I keep seeing that brought up.
Well, you have to read my books.
No,
essentially, what I believe it is Knights Templar used as a ruse, and if you look at it, a lot of the construction is based on 32 degrees of Scottish Rite Masonry, and Blue Lodge and chapter, the variety of levels and rituals that are applied physically on the ground, and the clues are right there. As I say, it's done its job. Oak Island has done its job. It's prevented many people from looking beyond. Many people have been stuck on Oak Island for 222 years, thinking that there's a treasure there.
Well, a lot of them say that the treasure was the one that came out of France when the Templars booked after the Pope was moved from Italy over to Nice.
Sure.
When the Emperor owed the Pope so much money, and it was easier for him to just say we were all heretics and pull that down and burn Demolay and the whole bit. That book, Born in Blood.
Yes.
I mean,
by James Robertson.
Right. I forget who wrote it, but I read that years ago. And that touched on different things, which was nice seeing them bring history in. But then again, I mean, as myself being involved with World War II for over 50 years, I found that you can't take just one book. You've got to really, or you have to look at somebody that's taken multiple resources and simmered it down and offered it to the reader so that they can come up with a conclusion that makes sense, not taking the reader's version of, which is very important in my, that's the way I look at it. I mean.
Well, I was just saying to Barbara, the way we should all look at it is take everything that you've learned or read, absorb it, and throw away about 90% of it.
Yeah.
And really distill it down to the truth.
I have a friend of mine that he died 2 years ago, but he was one of the interrogators at the Nuremberg trials. He saved everything. I've got binders of his documents. I've got verbatim interrogations, signed depositions, his IDs, attorney's instructions. You're flipping through this, and you have history by the throat, and a lot of it doesn't match up with what they're teaching in the schools.
No.
And you're comparing this, saying, well, this is primary source material. What are they teaching these kids? So not just kids, adults in colleges. So, it's frustrating. My wife says, why don't you collect Beanie Babies? Get out of history. It's safer. Or stamps that take up less room. No, I don't know.
Well, Mike, I was maybe I'll meet you in Washington. I was down in Washington last Easter for the sunrise ceremony. So.
Well, yeah, maybe down there. Did you run into Art down there?
Oh, yes, yep.
Well, tell Art, say this guy Mike, who's a collector, because he's also a collector like myself. He's been to my house.
Yeah,
tell him Mike says hi.
Art was the actual one who authenticated the Pike letters that I have.
Oh, yeah, that's great. How about Oscar? You know Oscar?
No, I've never met Oscar.
Okay, Oscar's fantastic.
Yeah, Barbara and Mark are sitting in the background going, who are these two guys talking about?
Yeah, you know what it shows? You know what it shows? A connection. It shows a connection that goes across bounds. I'm totally comfortable with Bill talking to him. And that's part of what it is.
This is a reunion. We're connecting people.
No, what it shows, Mark, is that there's a commonality to what we're talking about, and it can be interpreted on many levels. And if I'm speaking to somebody from Portugal, from Scotland, from Wales, from France, from Denmark, there's a commonality associated with that. And Barbara talked about that. There seems to be a common sort of spiritual awakening that people are coming together, free thinkers that are able to apply their own logic and reason to some of the things that are happening in the world right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I just had a colonel visit from Brazil. And he's a retired colonel from the Brazilian army. Didn't speak a word of English. But you know something? That didn't matter. It didn't matter. He sat in lodge with us. We had a wonderful time with him. Didn't speak a word of English. So it didn't matter.
You realize what's going to happen, Mike. Somebody's going to think this is a put-up that you phoned in specifically that to add to my credibility.
Yeah, no, not at all. That's why I asked. I was trying to be nice about it in the beginning to make sure. But there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of history, and thanks for clearing that up about that Priory of St. John thing, because I didn't know what they were.
No, there's a number of groups that have sort of assumed the persona of Knights Templar outside of Masonry that for whatever reason they've established their own sort of order and sort of start advertising out there, and all of a sudden they're the definitive voice for Knights Templarism across the world. But here's a question for everybody. This is really interesting, Mark, and you talked upon it a little in terms of these stones that Scott Walter has been discovering. If there's a treasure ever discovered, who does it belong to? That's one question I always love to put out there, because if you establish a definitive connection to the original nine Knights Templar, who does that treasure belong to?
Well, the native people were here before them, and but they also didn't really say that they owned the land.
So that's right. They were guardians. Yeah, so in actual fact, the native people are still guardians of the Templar treasure. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So I don't.
If the case of the treasure is wisdom, then it belongs to everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, not to sound like a pessimist here, but knowing how governments work and the amount of greed out in society today, whether it's Canada, America, or anything in Europe, that you know that the government will come in there and go, "That's ours, thank you." And then after the court trial, they might give a commission, but they're going to try to get their hands on all of it.
But there's a moral to that story. Maybe it should be well enough left alone.
Yeah.
Maybe the treasure is as we speak enlightenment, and we should just speak on those levels and not go looking for a physical treasure.
Yeah.
I really believe that if it ever is released or brought to the surface, that is only going to send us on another journey.
Oh, and it could create turmoil also.
Turmoil's good. Turmoil's good.
Well, maybe we can achieve that. The end of the rainbow, the treasure itself, without actually discovering the physical treasure. I don't want to go down the hole first. That's the whole thing.
Well,
I think that the wisdom that is there will shake up everybody, but it will bring them to a better understanding of themselves, ultimately.
Ultimately, after a certain amount of turmoil, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's going to end up in a court, and maybe David Brody will get the case.
Yeah, the attorneys they'll benefit the most from it. They'll make the money.
Now, don't pick on attorneys.
I told you I'm a pessimist. I'm in New York. It's a rough state to live in.
And I would hate to have to defend the case in New York itself. Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh. I told you they want right now. There's a bill where they want access to. They want our codes for the internet and for Facebook and any other Twitter account or anything you have, and they want the ability to go back 3 years of your records, of your archives, and for 1 full year of everything you've looked at on the internet. So they look at who you are before you get a gun permit or amend your permit to buy a gun or anything. And that's the first step. I mean, that's how they are. That's how people don't recognize it. I've had people say, well, it's for the greater good. No, I don't think they should have that access. But New York, we do things differently here.
Maybe we should get back. Barbara, get us back on the spirituality trail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have been amazed at the aspects of Freemasonry and the different levels and the different grades and the different perceptions that you get through your different levels. I was not aware of any of it. The Blue Lodge and then the other, the York and the
Scottish Rite.
Scottish Rite, yeah.
And to me, it says that it feels to me, what amazes me is that the different lodges don't really communicate that well, so that you guys are not going to take over the world. All you're trying to do is to take over your life. And I think I sorry to interrupt again. I can tell you that 95% of the Masons too that generally go to lodge in many ways don't ask these questions that we're talking about tonight.
No,
I know.
It's a shame, and it's trying to get good men to think on a higher level, and even those Masons, some Masons that are being initiated, they treat things all purely on one level.
Well,
and
my grandfather was.
They don't think about it. Yes.
And
there's a lot of allegory. There's a lot of allegory that they want you to think, but a lot of them never. As Bill said, they won't ask or they won't look deeper, but not all of them either want to run for an office. So it's hard to get them active, and it's.
It's very. Go ahead,
but
brother.
a lot of you do. A lot of you do ask the questions. A lot of you do go within. A lot of you do, even though you may not talk about it openly. The aspect of Freemasonry gives you the opportunity to expand. And it's whether or not you choose to is a whole other thing, but you do create the atmosphere for men to feel more comfortable within their own selves, and you do expose them to the possibility of that awareness, which is a great thing.
Yeah,
what's happening too, though, is I'm always constantly in debate with the older gentlemen in terms of how secretive should we be. Like my great uncle, I had no clue of his involvement. My father and his 7 brothers, I had no clue of their involvement. Even as I had an inclination, but no real definitive even nudge. I had to find everything out for myself. And in many cases, everybody passes away. Every time I think that I've found somebody that can, move me up a level in terms of enlightenment, they pass away. In many ways, Freemasonry has been a victim of its own secretiveness. So, some of the things that I talk about, I have people coming up to me in lodge and preceptory, Scottish Rite, whatever, and they say, thanks for talking about this because it should be talked about because, people have misconceptions about Masonry on so many levels.
A lot of the old timers, I agree with you, they're ruining it. You know what it is? We joke about it here, but it's the 2 old men from the Muppets sitting in the balcony. What were their names? Remember, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The 2 old guys.
The 2 old grumpy men.
Yes, that's them. We didn't do that in 1932. Well, of course you didn't. And, we're not doing anything out of the ordinary here. We're doing the ritual as it's written. We're doing it correctly. And no, you guys were doing it wrong back then. You were skipping stuff. You weren't doing the middle chamber. You weren't doing the lectures. What are you doing? And you're complaining, but they're ruining it. And I can see why a lot of the younger ones don't want to get involved because of that attitude. But I think it is changing. I'm 62.
It is changing. In part, it's changing, and I hate to say it, I call it the Da Vinci Code. It's sort of the syndrome. It's made people start to ask, that they start to realize that their grandfathers were Masons. And
but guys,
go ahead.
20 years ago, nobody would have talked on a radio show about Freemasonry like this.
No.
You've come a long way.
Well, even so, I think we're being careful about what we're saying, so we're not breaking any rules. So, you're not getting any ritual or anything that, that hardcore stuff where we would get in trouble by breaking, any oath that we took, per se. But, but family members, like you said, my father was a past master, and they just presented me last month with the Lewis Jewel. I don't know if you have that up in Canada. And that was an honor. I was honored to get that. It was great. And that's something they give you if you have a family member, a father or grandfather was a Mason earlier. But in the beginning, years ago, I didn't want anything to do with it. I grew up, my dad was a Shriner, and he was active. And when you're a kid, it's like, really? Because you're doing kid stuff. There are other distractions. And I'll tell you, I was with a band, and we had a quick story, and we had a gig down in Jackson, Mississippi. And I bought a brand new Chevy van, 1977. I was waxing that thing. I was so proud of it. Here comes my dad with this sticker disc that he's going to put it on the back of the van, and it's the past masters symbol. And I said, no, I don't know. I don't want bumper stickers. I don't want any of that junk on my van. No. And he said, you're going to put it whether you like it or not. It ended up on my truck. All right. So I'm driving with the band. I play Greek music. I'm Greek. So it's not like we're Black Sabbath. Never on a Sunday is over the Greek. Give me a break. And we're driving down through Alabama, and it was like 2 a.m. And yes, I'm speeding, and the state trooper pulls us over. And I thought, oh my God, we're dead. This guy's going to see the musical equipment and everything and think that he's got like Led Zeppelin and we're all druggies and partying, and he'll never find our bodies. I said, oh my God, this. And he got out of the car and he's staring at the back of my truck. And I woke the guys up. I said, guys, there's a state trooper. We're in trouble. I was speeding, and the guy walked up to my window, looked at me, and went, you're too young to be a past master, boy. This here must be your daddy's truck. And before I opened my mouth to answer him, and he went, you get your ass back down the road. You give fraternal greetings to your dad. You understand me, boy? I said, yes, sir. The next morning, I called my father. I said, send me a stack of those stickers. I want one on my forehead. I'm going to put one on the back of my pants. I'm going to put them on everything I own. My dad was laughing. He said, that's not the meaning of it. I said, oh, I don't know what it was, but I like that sticker. That was very good. Thank you. But to a kid, that's what it meant at the time. To us, it has a completely different meaning. But, but anyways.
Well, that's an interesting story. I hope we didn't offend anybody on that story. So
no, I don't think it would.
We're getting right to the end of the show, guys. So, okay. Mark, you should. Mark has a habit of saying half-hour goodbyes. So, Mark, you should start now.
All right, I'll mute myself.
Okay. Bill, people can get your Templar Meridians, the Knights Templar in the New World. What else? You can
go to any book and Templar Sanctuaries, any bookstore, Chapters, Indigo. You can order it right from innertraditions.com. People can visit my website, templarsnewworld.com. Let me just say, although the books have done really well and been translated into 5 different languages, I'm not into it to make money. In many ways, it's allowed me to sort out a lot of the things that go around in my head, and believe me, there's a lot of things that go around in my head. It's allowed me to really sort out a lot of the things on a variety of different levels.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. This was just a wonderful show. We'll see everyone on. I know we're doing our next show on January 3rd. Mike, appreciate you calling in, and Bill, please come back. Great evening, and we'll see everyone next week. How's that, Barbara and Blog Talk English Babe?
Oh my God! I mean, that was so fast. We still have 3 minutes. He usually goes over with all of this, but Bill, I do thank you. I'm going to call you and see if I can't get you on my Monday night show at some point in time, because I would love to go into all this material with you as well and see if we can't not reveal the source of the the location of the treasure, but talk more about the Sinclairs and
Sure.
that journey and the connection with the Native Americans, because it's a fabulous story.
To me, that's one of the best parts of the story, and to me, that it's a personal part of the story that I really enjoy, and it explains a lot of things. It explains, subconsciously how my parents got together, and were married in a month. They must have recognized something in both of them from a long time ago. So
that's spectacular. Well, I do appreciate your being on the show, and I'm really glad we made the connection, and I think this show is going to be up on YouTube tomorrow, so I hope that everybody visits it and follows our YouTube channel so that we can build a bigger following. So, guys, thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Bill, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good luck with the new year. Good night.
North Pole Hotline.
Help, I know Santa was busy, but he missed some big styles on my family's list.
Good thing there's Old Navy.
Old Navy?
Yep, right now, get up to 75% off store-wide. Old Navy's got everything you still want, from PJs to puffer jackets for the whole family.
Up to 75% off? Can't miss that.
Or this, all of Old Navy's super stylish jeans are on sale now, too, from just $15 for adults, $10 for kids.
Old Navy jeans are at the top of our list.
Hurry into Old Navy for up to 75% off store-wide right now. Store-wide sale valid 12/26 through 1/2. In stores only. Jean sale valid 12/26 through 1/2. Excludes in-store clearance. North Pole Hotline.
Help, I know Santa was busy, but he missed some big styles on my family's list.
Good thing there's Old Navy.
Old Navy?
Yep, right now, get up to 75% off store-wide. Old Navy's got everything you still want, from PJs to puffer jackets for the whole family.
Up to 7